On a recent trip to Tucson, I stopped to see the former home of a notorious Southwestern author. Afterwards, I became inspired to visit the desert wilderness he's purported to be buried in and find his grave. Debating the prospect of such an adventure with my friend Jeff, we decided to postpone that trip and instead look for a stone arch we'd both recently heard about. The search would take us to an area where the Sonoran Desert meets the Mojave Desert, a wilderness area I had not spent much time in, but quickly judged to be one of the most interesting and beautiful I've ever stepped foot onto. Leaving the highway a couple hours outside of Phoenix, we drove a few miles along a well-graded dirt road before turning onto an old Jeep track, past open cattle ranges, across a dozen washes and arroyos, and then an old retired Army colonel turned prospector hiding from the BLM. We asked him about a granite stone arch we understood to be located nearby. Reluctantly, he shared that another hiker had asked him the day prior about an arch in the area, and that the man had returned, found the arch, and even provided some additional clues to its whereabouts. We came prepared with some reference points, photos, and anecdotal hints about the arch and its location, but had a sense we would have some work to do walking the hills and scouting the landscape looking for it. The colonel allowed us to review the notes left by the hiker, who'd returned to the old man's camp while he was away. The hiker included coordinates for a vista where the arch could be viewed, but not its precise location. We continued on the road and found a spot to park and strike out. With day packs and enough provisions to entertain us for several hours, we started off towards an area we'd already decided was most promising, in spite of the fact the location left to the old man was several miles east of us. The terrain was accessible and the hiking fairly easy over foothills dissected with dry wash beds lined with mesquite and palo verde, subtle mesas with prickly pear, cholla, and creosote, saguaro-studded hillsides, and forests of juniper and yucca. In spite of all the thorns, needles, fishhooks, and bayonets these plants threatened us with, the plants were spaced apart at almost perfect intervals. The ground between these plants consisted of mostly quarter-inch gravel or clusters of boulders worn round by wind and erosion. After a couple hours, we rested on the edge of one of the higher mesas and considered our options. We felt confident we were close to finding the arch, but were humbled by the distance between our location, the location offered by the old man, and the fact that we had still not found the stone monolith. After some deliberation, we agreed to continue with our own instincts. We felt much of the information about this area is deliberately vague, and the spirit of this adventure required one to have some doubt, get thirsty, sunburned, scrape a few knuckles, and draw some blood. Our perseverance paid off. Another hour later, when we crossed another range and caught sight of a mountain on the horizon we recognized from some of the photos we'd brought along. Turning a corner, Jeff was first to glimpse at the arch. I could sense in the sound of his voice before I made the bend that we had succeeded. We spent the rest of the afternoon admiring the stone span, watching the changing light bathe the arch from afternoon to evening, and wandered the desert surrounding it. We hiked back to the truck by moonlight, deliberately avoiding headlamps to preserve our eyes and admire the cloud cover over our heads, the stillness of the desert, and the solitude we shared. After meals of dried and canned soup, We spent the rest of the evening congratulating ourselves for finding the arch, praising each other for the effort we made, and planning our next adventure.